Welcome to You've Only Come to Hear United. I don't really have any plans for this show specifically today. I haven't done as many over December, purely because of two reasons. One, the amount of games, and the other one is my house has been completely obliterated by illness. So opportunities have been few and far between, but I don't think that's been too much of a bad thing, to be honest, with the the way things are going at the moment, the way people feel about the ownership of the club, some of the financial decisions that Sir Jim Ratcliffe's been making, the way performances have been on the pitch as well. Maybe that's the best place to start, is the way we've been playing at the moment. Its performances have been abject. You know, that's me basically saying they've been shit without saying they've been shit. Um, yeah, I don't know where we go for the rest of this season. After the City game, there was, some renewed optimism. There was a sense of, positivity. We could see potentially an upwards trajectory starting, which it was a full storm though. And when you look at the Wolves game in particular, there was just nothing going on there. I've spoken to my dad about this. He's a United fan since the '60s, and for him, he immediately goes back to, I think, more the '70s and the '80s. He was talking about being bottom of the league or there or thereabouts, and looking to. I think they beat Liverpool. I think he said 2-0. Kind of come out of nowhere, and that's basically what you look forward to around those times. When were the big games coming up, and can we get a result of those, and then going back into school and being like, got a result. And I think it's where we're at now. I do feel. I mean, I was lucky enough to sort of grow up through the '90s, and you didn't know anything other than just success after success after success. Finishing second was the end of the world. Finishing third was like, oh, that's just the worst possible outcome whatsoever. And I don't think we did in the '90s. I think it wasn't until the noughties that happened. So it's what the younger generations will be feeling now, though. It's you're coming into sort of your football awareness over the last few years. The Carabao Cup and FA Cup wins, I feel, massive probably. And the idea of being champions is, it's almost United have got this mythology around them now. This isn't just something United do. This is now something United used to be. And for me, it sort of got to maybe a decade after Sir Alex Ferguson, whereby it felt like the natural. I think probably the end, maybe a bit more than maybe the end of Erik ten Hag's reign, has felt like this natural end of the chance to sort of continue our success. I think that's dead now. Maybe I gave it too long to begin with, but whatever we do now has to be new. Whatever we do now has to be a fresh start. And maybe how bad we are on the pitch. Maybe this is Amarim's origin story, if you like. That he's going to have to go through these trials and this turmoil of having like a really maybe bad first half of season. It's worth revisiting the fact that he didn't want to come. He didn't want to join us at this point in the season. We sort of laid down that now or never gauntlet to him to see if he wanted to come to us. I think maybe we were testing his desire, I guess, and maybe it was just a needs must thing. We're not going to have an interim. We want a manager who can come in now. So if you want that to be you're not going to get another bite at the cherry. And he chose to come. But I think you can see clearly why he didn't want to come now. There's a lot of mess to sift through. But as I'm talking, I'm just thinking, it's probably for the best. Like, you want to come in the summer, Marcus Rashford's probably still going to be there because of the contract he's on. Whoever comes in on an interim basis is going to be using him. But if, Andy Mitten said to Talksport, previous Manchester United managers have had issues with Marcus Rashford, and this isn't a new phenomenon. It would have been something that any new manager would have had to have dealt with in the summer anyway. Maybe this is something that we can, close the book on now and get some closure on. And that's one less thing to have to worry about come the summer. And then that'll be the case, I imagine, with other players too, where Amarin's getting a chance to assess everybody, and you can get the chance to go, you're going to work, you're not going to work, and we get a clean shot at it next year. I mean, it should have been this summer. We should have made the managerial change then. We all knew Erik ten Hag was the dead man walking once that sounded out every other manager, you know, plausible manager in Europe. All it was going to take was a bad string of results, and Erik was going to go. Speaking about Erik ten Hag, this is me having no direction at all in this sort of, I guess, ramble. Was that I think things were allowed to drift because you didn't know what you were going to get from an Erik ten Hag side from one week to the next, other than confusion, chaos. Even with a good result, you kind of wondered, how did we get there? And I think things were so muddled, it was sometimes hard to decipher between, is this ten Hag's fault or the players' fault? And, you heard both. You heard both sort of storylines at the same time from different people. And I think now we've got Ruben Amorim. There's one or two things I'd prefer that he did differently, but generally I think it's very clear what he's trying to do. It's hard to disagree with the majority of things that he's doing. But he does really expose the players, and you can see players that are struggling from my perspective, they're struggling with very simple requests. Looking at the positions they're playing in, you're thinking, you might not be a specialist in that role per se, but this isn't like Erik ten Hag and you're trying to scratch your head and work out what you're being asked to do. Sometimes you're literally going, you can't make a simple pass. How can you not make a simple pass? How can you not hit the target? How can you, not defend your area? Some of the mistakes Onana's making. We're seeing really basic fundamental stuff, which I don't think you can attribute to the change in system and the change in the way we're trying to play. That makes things more autonomous for players. The more they get used to stuff, the more repetition you have of something, obviously it's going to become easier. I don't think a lot of what we're seeing go wrong for us is down to that. It's not like we're seeing moves break down because they don't understand each other yet. We're seeing some really fundamental stuff, which is worrying. It is really worrying that the players we've got can't do that. And if you take the money away from what we've paid for certain players and you look at our squad, man for man against the likes of, yes, your Brightons and your Brentfords and people around us, you can argue, yes, we should be better. And go, we should be beating X, Y, and Z. Well, a Manchester United, with the resources and funding we have, should be. But these players, player for player, let's have a look. If you go look at Rasmus Højlund, I'm a big fan of Rasmus Højlund, but taking off my personal bias, for him and being a fan of his, if that had been someone like, Brentford had signed him from Atlanta for, let's say, 30 million, there was less interest in him, and he'd done well. No one else was there, and they got him like 30 to 40 million pounds, which clubs are doing that. You look at Bournemouth and the Evan Nilsson signing. People would probably be saying, like, why don't we make these type of signings for one? But also, if you hit the ground running, it wouldn't be as big. Or if you didn't hit the ground running, it wouldn't be as big a deal as it is for us spending the money we did on him. It wasn't an obvious signing. It was one for the future. We didn't have our ready-made number 9. We didn't have our Harry Kane, to shoulder the burden of being the main man for Manchester United. And you can see that across the team. We probably get Lenny Yoro's going to end up in that position now. Ahmad's still young, really. He's come and been such an important player for us in recent weeks, but he's still a young guy. Garnacho's getting a lot of stick, and it's like the amount of football he's played for someone his age. You should still be looking at him going, his potential trajectory at United is there's not really a ceiling on that at the moment. He could just keep doing more and more. Every young player's going to have a dip in form. Not just your young player. Every player has spells of poor form. So yeah, the stick there is absolutely bizarre. Kobe Mainoo's starting to come in for some. I think everyone knew that was going to come at some point. He had such a phenomenal start and form dips off. But this shouldn't be. The point is that the pressure shouldn't be on these guys. Their form is going to tail off. They need to have people in there who, established players who they're trying to usurp. And they just don't really have that. Not players who are in their prime. You're talking about they're 26, 27, 28s. We brought a guy in at a good age, because as he's heading towards those years, he might become one of those for us, but he needs a partner probably in their prime. to, you want, for example, like having Keane, Scholes, Nicky Butt, Ronnie Johnson, and Phil Neville with part of that squad who can move into midfield. That came obviously a little bit later on. Darren Fletcher later on, but you had players at the club at the same time, and things weren't expected of your players coming through. Even in going back to when we beat Arsenal 8-2, and we had, I think, Anderson and Tom Cleverley in centre midfield. People looked at that and went, there was no expectations that Anderson and Tom Cleverley were going to be part of a midfield that put 8 past Arsenal. It's just. But now, if you're going into a big game and Cobby's one of the two in that midfield, he's seen as he's like your star man. I mean, Paul Scholes wasn't that in centre midfield. Paul Scholes was a sort of more or less a striker, playing behind the striker at that sort of age, and he moved backwards. He was allowed to have his natural career development. It's the same for a lot of the players. Phil Neville ended up becoming a centre midfield. Essentially, spent a lot of his time at right back and left back. Changed over the years, and it happened to a lot of players. And I don't think that. I mean, these guys are having to have all of their teething problems very, very publicly, and the state of the internet, social media makes that even harder. I'm talking about it now, and I have to admit, I've tried to take off my. More recently, I'm trying to take off my my sort of YouTube channel hat. If I wanted to do this just to be a fan and talk about sort of United, and you kind of find yourself easily getting kind of drawn into the way people sort of communicate and share these ideas and their thoughts and stuff, and it's very easy to get wrapped up in a sort of I don't know, like an uncomfortable wrapping. You're putting this stuff out there in a way that you don't necessarily like to sort of find it yourself. It's just you realise everyone's doing it, and it's just the name of the game. It's what people do, but I don't think it shouldn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's very easy to get caught up in it. So yeah, it's difficult for these players, and I think it is our duty as fans to get behind the young players in particular. There are exceptions to that. I think there can be exceptions to that, as we found with the Mason Greenwood situation, which you don't need to go into in any detail. But a little bit different for the more established players. I think that's why people have been so hard on Marcus Rashford at the moment. I think that's probably a nice little natural sort of movement into one of the topics that we haven't covered on this channel. For him to ask for a move, I can understand that being, which is effectively done, saying he wants a new challenge. That can be, I can see that really pissing fans off, but I'm glad he's done that. I'm glad there hasn't been some sort of, where do we stand? What do you mean? He's not talking riddles. That's pretty clear. And we've had it in the past where people haven't been really honest about what they've wanted, and you're kind of wondering, okay, what do you really want here? And he's given us a lot of his career. I've not always been his biggest fan. I think in the early years in particular, I was definitely really wanted him to do well. And then maybe the last probably the last three years or so, you thought he'd arrive with that, the season, well, to say the season, it was a few months where he plundered a lot of goals, and you thought maybe this is it, maybe that he's turning that corner. But to revert back to, I was going to say revert back to someone who doesn't score a lot of goals, but to be honest, he's always been in fits and starts. I think that's been Marcus's problem. I don't think you can ever have him revert back to any type of Marcus Rashford, because what is Marcus Rashford as a footballer? What is, and it isn't necessarily his fault, but I can't really pin down. I can't really pin down what sort of player he is. I think he has suffered a little bit from the phenomenon of Thierry Henry and Cristiano Ronaldo being that player who can come off the flank and score a lot of goals from that position. I don't think he's that. I don't think he's a centre forward. I think he's got immense quality and skill. He can hit a ball amazingly, but having probably an idea in his head of who he wants to be as a footballer, then being asked by different managers to play in different positions in different ways, playing with different teammates, different structures, systems. I don't know how you develop your own sense of identity. It might have been better for him to have moved a long time ago. There would have been uproar amongst the fans if he had moved when he was younger. Like, why are we getting rid of one of our best young players? But for his own personal development and career, it probably would have been better for him, because things have been so messy at United. It's not been a good environment for a young player to come through. You'll get opportunities. I mean, that's been definitely shown by different managers over the past sort of decade plus. But whether those opportunities are going to be conducive of having a regular position, having a solid career in that position, it definitely hasn't been the case. I think we're seeing the likes of Diogo Dalot struggle at the moment from being regularly played out of position, despite starting off playing at Porto at left back. I think he's definitely suffering from not having that sort of, not being a regular right back really, which would have done in the world of good elsewhere. His versatility's been a hindrance to him, other than giving him more starts and more appearances. In terms of really nailing down a position, that's been a negative for him. I think we're seeing potentially that happen now with Garnacho, because with the system we're playing, the roles that are available to him are going to be that attacking centre midfielder and potentially as a wing back. And the more he doesn't play as a wide attacking midfield, a winger essentially, or an inverted winger, is he gonna, you can look at it one way, that he's going to require a new skill. But if you are then, your existing position, you're not honing your craft in the place where you probably best play, his future may be best served elsewhere. Is it best for United and for him in the long run to keep playing out of position? Because if his performances decrease, his value is going to decrease. He's not going to play at United. Other clubs won't spend as much money on him as maybe they would have done 12 months ago. And you can look through the squad and wonder, that is the two in midfield we've got at the moment, or the 2-10's going to work for a Kobe Mainoo? Is he better in a different system and in a different midfield? There's a lot of unknown at the moment, but it could cause a lot of damage to our young players in the future. I mean, luckily, a lot of them will. I predict they'll have a lot more stability under Amorim. I think he'll be given a fair crack at it. There is a worry that Ineos are quite reactive with what they've done with Dan Ashworth, for example. He came in and they thought, no, this isn't right, so they got rid of him quickly. Yeah, there's scope they could do that with Amorim, but my gut feeling is that they won't do that. Can't know that for sure, but if that is the case, then it'd be good for these young players. I think they need some stability in the manager, and I think we've got someone who, the way they come across to the media, the way they portray their ideas, the way they conduct themselves, the way they've set a team up, it seems to make a lot of sense. So I think he needs to be given that chance, and players can sort of flourish in that system without being moved around too much. Because I think Marcus definitely suffered from that. I think Tony Marshall suffered from that too. You could even say the same for the likes of Pogba and stuff. I know a lot of things have been said about certain players' attitudes at Manchester United, and maybe that would play a part in them not being the successes they should have been. But I also think they've suffered from playing in really a really volatile environment where they've lacked stability. The management has changed a lot, the voice has changed a lot at United, so it's not been an easy environment to be a footballer in. But again, maybe if we'd had better professionals at the club, as maybe we wouldn't have had, they found a way to work within the ever-changing environment. But anyway, I think we're going to leave it there, because we could rant and go on about a lot of the different things at the club. And you're not going to really get anywhere. It's just pretty sad at the moment to see where we are. We've got Newcastle tomorrow night at the time I'm recording this, and regardless of whatever that score is, we win 3-0, lose 4-5-0. It doesn't really make much of a difference to where things are at the moment. Even if we get positive results against Liverpool and Arsenal, it doesn't really make too much of a. It doesn't really change anything. January is going to be interesting. I think. I guess final sort of point is we definitely need to get a wing back in. I think the left wing back is absolutely needed. We can't continue with Dalot there and cutting back inside all the time. I'm really worried about our lack of width at the moment. I was quite excited at first with Ahmad in the wing back position. I prefer him at 10, but it meant we were getting into attacking areas in the final third and wide areas and pulling that ball back. And I thought we're finally creating chances for the forwards, and that seemed to dry up. We saw it against Everton, 2 areas positive, but recently it seems to have dried up. And I felt so sorry for Højlund against Wolves. I thought he's feeding off nothing. he has his critics, but there was just nothing there for him. Anyway, that's it for me for now. I'll be back with another ramble or rant soon. Fingers crossed for 3 points against Newcastle, but at the moment, yeah, this season feels very much like in the league anyway. This season feels very much a write-off for me. Maybe we can do something positive in the cup still, at least.